Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News Editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning in for the 4 o'clock show. I'd like to thank Jennifer Lawless down at UVA Talking Politics. I'd like to get a little more local here about a timely issue. So Kailey David, thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I appreciate your coming in from the Family Service of Rhode Island to talk about a topic that is year-round, but as kids head back to school and families get kids ready, obviously, we saw several tragedies already this week. The big one, obviously, in Florida at the esports gaming tournament. A troubled young man took the lives of others and himself. So wanted to talk mental health as we head back to school. All ages, from the younger ones to especially middle school and high school, because some anxiety is normal, but sort of when to be concerned about a child, when to have discussions with a child, and when to seek help for a child.
So I think one of the important things to note is that most kids are a little bit nervous. That's pretty typical. And then I think with our current dynamics in the last year or so and the amount of school shootings and how broadcasted those are and how easily accessible that information is to kids, that we're seeing even more anxiety about going back to school from both parents and kids. So it's really important to know that you are probably feeling anxiety as a parent and that your kid's probably feeling a little bit of anxiety as they're kind of going back to school. That's typical, and kind of typical anxiety about anything from the first day of school to tests. That is really normal, and that anxiety actually helps us succeed in life. We want to be nervous about a test because then we study for it. When we notice that there's a problem is that it's impairing a child's functioning. So they're not getting up to go to school, or it's been a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and you are dragging them kicking and screaming to the bus stop because they're so nervous about going to school. Or if you're noticing that their functioning at home or in the community just isn't what it normally is, or they're reporting that they're having anxiety attacks or panic attacks, trouble breathing. You know, the first thing we want to do is bring them to the doctors, but those also might be signs of of anxiety.
And so is that the place to start? If you've got a family physician you see for annuals or maybe when they have colds, do you start there or do you go right to the mental health professionals?
It really depends. You have the option to do either. Most of the doctors can give you a referral for a mental health counselor that they're connected with, that they know that maybe other patients have had good experience with. But you can also go directly to a mental health treatment center, or you can go to an individual therapist that might be doing private practice and call them, and they'll do a phone screening or an intake where they're asking some specific questions about current symptoms that your child's experiencing, and they're kind of setting up maybe a plan for what type of treatment might be the best option for you.
And what if you have a child, a student, middle school, high school age, as adults, it's tough for anyone to sort of wrap their brain around that they might be having problems, but for a child who might be hesitant to see someone that might say, oh, well, I'm not crazy, like I don't need to see someone. How do you suggest parents broach in that sense of we're here to help and here's how we're going to help you if they sense some reticence from their kids?
So one of the important things is if you're noticing changes in mood, sleep, appetite, if you're noticing that they're giving away stuff or they're becoming really irritable or that they're isolating, those are kind of behaviors that you can start pointing out. And I always tell parents to come from a place of concern. I'm concerned about you and your safety, and then ask direct questions. If you're nervous about a child that's maybe they're really anxious about school, you're asking directly, are you really nervous about going to school? Do you get nervous during the day? If you're nervous that your child might be experiencing something like depression or is at risk for suicide, it's not going to hurt that child to say, are you thinking about suicide? I've noticed all of these things. I'm really concerned about you and I want to get you the help that you need. And I think it's also important, I'll go with you, right? When it's a child or an adolescent seeking treatment, the parent should be involved in the treatment. And then the therapist and the child and yourself as a parent will determine the best course of treatment moving forward. But the first session, you can certainly say, I'm going to come with you, I'm going to help them kind of see, or I'm going to tell them what I'm noticing, and we're going to figure out how to best help you. And this is to help. It's not to say that you're crazy. Everyone experiences really difficult things in a different way, and we want to get you the skills that you need to be able to handle all of these difficult things that you're going through.
Do you think, it's been a few years now, and I don't know if the same cohort of kids is watching it, but that show, 13 Reasons Why, Did that increase the dialogue about mental health amongst kids and just make it more of a reality? What was the role of that? I mean, I think back, you're slightly younger than I am, but that was certainly not something that was around when I was a teen. How has that entered the dialogue with kids, as you said, being able to access both information online about what's happening in terms of casualties around the country, but of course, now we're seeing even in the entertainment business and tackling the issue as well.
Yeah. So I think one of the important things is I tell almost every adolescent that comes in to see me has watched 13 Reasons Why. So it is a very popular TV show. I encourage parents to watch with their kids, to have dialogue about it, because it is really sensationalized, and some of those experiences that are happening throughout the show that you can now binge watch, which kind of makes it a little bit more concerning.
Okay.
Are about sexual abuse. They are about suicide. They are about really difficult, traumatic events in people's lives. And we as parents need to be responsible for starting conversations and providing accurate information to our kids. So if you're watching it together, you can kind of pause it and say, hey, let's talk a little bit more about this, or let's look up something together. And then be aware, if your child has experienced traumatic events, it might be really triggering, even if they want to watch that show, to watch it. And so you should be available to talk about that if that's something that they're watching.
And how involved and what age, and I've talked with professionals about this before, but it's always a good sort of refresher, especially the world of social media.
Yeah.
And a lot of times kids are kids, they want to be private, they don't want mom and dad to be privy to their conversations at the middle school and high school level. But if there's something of concern, if there's concern for bullying, if there's on either side, if their child's being bullied or might be engaging in bullying behaviors, what do you advise parents in terms of their social media monitoring as far as their kids are concerned?
So I think starting from a really early age, having boundaries and perimeters around social media. So if you come to your kid today and you've never set any boundaries around it, and you say, I'm going to be looking at it, you have to open it to me, you have to give me your password.
Might be tough.
You might have a really difficult interaction. But if you start really young around kind of limiting media exposure, around kind of appropriate use of the internet, and you're doing internet safety at an early age, then it should be a much easier conversation to say, or it might never be a conversation because you've always been a friend on their social media page, or they've always known that you're going to have their passwords. I think family to family, as parents, we have to determine if we want our children to have access to that and how early we do. And then reading on literature about how much media exposure from TV to social media to cell phones that kids are having and how that impacts kind of brain development. And then making choices for you and your child. But the earlier that we have those conversations, the better off we are, and the less of a head-on collision we might have with our kid when we're trying to have that conversation at 15 or 16.
Because it clearly varies across families and parenting styles, and as you said, having the conversation early, screen time, whether that be laptop, whether that be phone. Obviously, there's a number of kids who are going to take whatever their device is and go under their sheets, and it might not get much sleep because we know these young folks like to stay up late and have these conversations with the fear that maybe they'll miss out on some conversation at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then obviously viewing the parents as the bad guy if they can't have their device with them at all times. Again, does that just go back to having those conversations at the younger age? Is limiting screen time important?
I believe that limiting screen time is important, and really being cognizant that it's not just TV. I mean, it's not just your laptop and your phone, it's also the TV. And we know that it actually impacts kids' sleep, that if we're viewing, or any of our sleep, if we're viewing LED lights, that is telling our brain to stay awake. So being really careful about removing them earlier or doing something after dinner that's not watching the TV or being on a cell phone. And an important thing is, as parents, we have the opportunity to model that. So we can't ask our kids to not be on their phones if we've spent the whole day on our cell phones. So we have to take a step and really look at how we're operating in terms of our screen time to be able to model appropriate screen time for youth. And then just having the conversation earlier and earlier about internet safety, about bullying, about cyberbullying, so that, that's just a normal conversation that you're having as a family, and that they're well aware when someone comes up to them, like maybe a therapist if they're coming in for treatment and says, let's talk about internet safety, that they know it all already. That's the kind of the hope of any parent, is that we provided them with the information they need in order to stay safe, because the internet has really great things to offer our kids, but we want to make sure that they're being safe and that we're taking the responsibility of saying this is appropriate or this isn't appropriate for you.
The kids, I mean, when they get to that high school level, I mean, the middle school might be tough, but it's like anything else, you know, the parent says no more sugar cereal and they really want it. This is the sugar, this is the hit. We know that this sort of instant gratification is like, oh my God, I need this, I want this, this is my screen. You're taking it away from me, you're such a meanie, like I hate you. But because their brains aren't fully formed, do they actually comprehend if a parent tried to explain it to them why it's not good to be on? Or do you just have to be the parent and be like, I'm the parent, you're the child, here's the rule?
So I think a little bit of both. No matter what, our kids are going to hate us at some point in time, but they're going to say it. And so know that they don't hate us. They might be saying that, but it might be out of anger, and a lot of us say things out of anger that we don't mean. I think it's important to have the conversation when a kid is not already escalated. So if you're about to take away that cell phone and they are screaming, it's not the time to have a conversation on why it might be helpful to their brain to
It's on the parent. Yeah, give me the phone.
Yeah, and again, if it's set up that this has always been a thing, then it'll be really normalized for them, versus you're now in high school, you've had this phone, and I've let you sleep with it underneath your pillow, and now I'm going to ask for it at 7. That's it's a much different conversation. It might be much more difficult. It might be worth having, but it's much more difficult.
And what do you say, especially to those kids? It's difficult, obviously, to find if a student's being bullied, but if you find your student is the bully, how to have those conversations with your kid?
So I think it's important to know that, you know, oftentimes when kids are lashing out, that there's something going on for them internally. So being really mindful and trying to have conversations about feelings. That, you know, oftentimes we see that when kids don't have the ability to express how they're feeling, or they feel like they can't express how they're feeling. And again, it's the same sort of thing around getting kind of help. We might need help in order for you to learn new skills to manage these really tough emotions. And oftentimes, you know, kids are feeling something different, and the bullying is kind of a symptom of that bigger experience for them. But we should be able to we should be having conversations about what bullying is, about what cyberbullying is with our kids, whether we know that there's bullying going on or not, because they could be breaking laws by participating in cyberbullying, and oftentimes they're not aware of that until something really difficult has happened. And that might be their first introduction into kind of the laws around cyberbullying and their discrimination and bullying policies at their school.
Well, I just wanted you to come in again. And some kids are already back at school. Some kids are heading back to school next week. But as always, just sort of what to think about as it concerns your child's mental health. Anything we didn't touch upon besides the resources available at the Family Service of Rhode Island?
So that's really important. You can always give us a call if you're looking for services. You can call our direct line at 331-1350. That's a 401 area code. And you can also find us on www.familyserviceri.org. And we also have a wealth of information on there for parents, and we are always willing to talk to you if there's things that are going on that you're not sure if this fits coming in for mental health treatment. And I think the most important thing is really modeling for our kids. If I feel anxious as a parent, modeling going to a therapist is an okay thing to do, and that it helps. So that's the most important thing, is to really model what you're asking your child to do.
Well, Kayla, I appreciate your taking the time to come in here to the studio. Don't go anywhere. I'll be back to wrap up here in the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm GoLocal News editor Kate Nagel. Thanks for tuning into the 4 o'clock news and politics show. Appreciate Jennifer Lawless Skyping in from the University of Virginia to talk about the latest, including the coverage of the passing of Senator John McCain, where things might stand or not with the Mueller investigation with the elections approaching, and what to expect over the next couple of months as the battle is on for control of Congress. I would also like to thank Kailey David with Family Service of Rhode Island to come in light of kids going back to school and a couple of events recently, including the shooting at the esports tournament, and talking with kids about mental health, signs to look for, and resources here in Rhode Island that can enable kids and families to seek help if needed. So I want to just thank again Family Service of Rhode Island for taking the time to come in. If you missed her at 3 o'clock, Rachel Nunes was up with 4 full guests. The big story just broken on GoLocal. A Facebook argument here in Rhode Island went to the level of a national employer firing an employee for what was put on Facebook in the course of the argument. GoLocal has all of that on golocalprov.com. Be sure to tune in to GoLocal on Facebook throughout the evening, our website, and of course we'll be back here in studio tomorrow. We'll have Laura Afonso talking all things food and fun. I'll be back at 4 o'clock. We look forward to seeing you here at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center.